Welcome to our 105th podcast. Today, we're continuing our discussion about stakeholder engagement from our last episode, moving from communication to learning and development and rewards and reinforcement. What's one thing you can do to effectively help enable learning within your organization and establish the mechanisms to keep your team satisfied, productive, and engaged? Keep listening to find out. Welcome to Harmonious Workplaces, a podcast about corporate culture, organizational change management, and workplace behavior. Harmonious Workplaces was started by independent consultants to explore and challenge workplace issues and to build better ways of working. It's a blend of theory and practice, grounded in real-world experience, working with organizations of all sizes across a wide range of industries. If you own a business, lead a team, want fresh ideas about the workplace, or just enjoy listening to consultants talk candidly about how to make work more effective and more enjoyable, we invite you to sit back, relax, and dive in with us to Harmonious Workplaces. Hello, Harmonious Workplaces listeners. Welcome back to our podcast. I'm Rich Cruz, an organizational development consultant, and this is Ben Kleiman, a certified change management professional. Hey, Ben, how are you this morning?
Hey, Rich. Hey, everyone.
All right, Ben. So last episode 104, we kind of picked up on episode 29 from one of our earlier episodes about stakeholder engagement, right? And we just and we said that in the episode, we kind of scratched the surface, right? And mainly concentrated on communication, but there's still so much more to this than that. Right?
Yeah, and what I loved about our conversation last time is we did focus on the communication aspect of stakeholder engagement, and really we talked about how it was two-way and that listening component was super important. And then you also had
Right.
formal, informal, you had internal communication and external communication. By that I mean internal to your organization and external to your customers, vendors, stakeholders, external to your organization, things like that. So really nice conversation around the various aspects of communication. But there's so much more to stakeholder engagement. And so that's, I think,
Sure.
where we're going to be going today in terms of learning and development, which is so much more than just training. And then also rewards and reinforcement. So those kinds of things we'll talk about. Recognition and also consequences. So people
Absolutely.
understand where they stand.
Sure. And we have had several other podcasts, both on communication. We've had some that have been
Oh,
specifically
yeah.
on that. And then we've had some that we've talked about, especially our motivation episodes where we've talked about rewards, and we've talked
hmm
a significant amount about learning and development.
Right. Right.
So go to our website and use that search to search up those episodes. There's
Sorts
something
of
to learn.
gold there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right on.
But I think for right now, in terms of today's conversation and last time's conversation, couching it within the frame of stakeholder engagement specifically. So
Right. Stakeholder
good
engagement,
stuff.
L&D, and then rewards and reinforcement.
Right. Building on communication. So really those three components make for
Sure.
a very good comprehensive way to engage with your different stakeholders. And very broadly speaking, if you can cover each of those, you're going to be in good shape. And then one of the things that I thought we might mention, it almost goes without saying, but I feel like we have to say it because if we don't, people will sort of assume that one size fits all in terms of your model, your framework, your approach, your plan, whatever you want to call it, your strategy. There is a lot of guidelines and guidances and best practices out there, but I personally have never seen to where you can just drop in a single model and apply it as is and have it work really well. I think there's always going to be an element of using your judgment, using your experience, using your wisdom, and tailoring that model and the whole idea of what that model is and that approach or that framework, why they approach it that way. You can use that theory then to apply specifically to your initiative within your organization, your constraints, your enablers, all of that kind of good stuff, your culture. Those are the those are the really key things to think about when you actually activate these types of things.
Sure, sure. Yeah. So one size does not necessarily fit all on any of these
I,
frameworks that we have.
I've never seen it. Have you? Have you ever seen it where you just drop in a model or a framework and it's beautiful
No,
and
no.
perfect?
This is one of these, where adaptability is paramount, right? And how you
Right.
can tailor your, so there's the individual. Sometimes you need to have some uh what do you call it, exceptions, right? To what those kind of rules are within the frameworks, right? In order to
Hmm.
reach somebody else, right? So,
Yeah.
but it's helpful to have multiple different uh, disciplines and multiple different frameworks to be able to pull from, so that we can leverage some of the evidence that's out there, right?
Oh,
We're not just
absolutely.
we're not
Yeah.
just spitballing, right?
No, no, and I'm not. Forgive me if it sounds like I'm suggesting that. I'm not at all,
Oh
and
no,
and
not
I
at
think it's
all,
very critical that we do understand what our guardrails are, or what
right?
the riverbed is on the other side of our river, so we don't overflow the river. I mean, we've talked about that on many of our episodes about how
Absolutely,
um, you have this parameters within which you can operate, and
right.
once you know what that is, then you can be very creative with how you go about things. And I think that's sort of the special sauce about what makes a really good practitioner a really good practitioner is they understand how to leverage everything within their toolkit, within that framework or within those guardrails without necessarily adhering to the precise, specific, only that approach, only that way.
Sure, sure, makes
Yeah.
sense. Well, Ben,
Cool.
let's do this. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, let's pick up on L&D, and then
Learning and
maybe in
development,
the
L&D.
yep, L&D. Yes, learning and development, and then let's after the second break, we'll dive into the second aspect of this, which is that rewards and reinforcement structure.
R&R,
Oh, I love that.
or is that
That's that.
different?
That I was gonna say that means something different to me, but all right, we'll be right back.
Oh, hi. I'm Hermie, the HR hermit crab. So, if you've ever sat in a meeting thinking, are we all talking about the same thing? I have a book that might feel very familiar. In my third cartoon book, Trust Fall Pratfalls, you'll find a collection of short, funny workplace moments. The kind that make you laugh and then immediately think, yeah, we do that. We cover things like unclear priorities, communication that somehow creates more confusion, leaders who mean well but miss the mark, and employees trying to make sense of it all. It's basically a highlight reel of how the heck did this happen? But each story also contains evidence based, valuable information such as simple ways to communicate better, practical ways to support your team, and small changes that make work a little more, well, workable. You can finish each story in just a couple of minutes and actually use the lessons the next day. Plus, it's a cartoon book, so you can leave it on your desk and be the envy of all your cubicle mates. Check out Herbie the HR Hermit Crab Trust Fall Pratfalls, available now on Amazon. Visit www.hermiehrhermitcrab.com or www.harmoniousworkplaces.com/Herbie. Oh, and if you see your workplace in here, maybe don't read it out loud in the next staff meeting. Make change your friend. Bye.
And we're back. Okay, Ben. So the two aspects that we're talking about today, specifically in stakeholder engagement, are learning and development, and then again we're gonna talk a little later about rewards and reinforcement. But yeah, let's dive into this L&D learning development portion of this.
Right, right, right. And
Yeah,
learning and development is like communication, so broad and it can be so many things. And
right.
more than just training. So a lot of times you'll be on an initiative and you'll be probably about three quarters done, and somebody says, "Oh, what about training?" And that is great that you're thinking about it, but it is so much more than just sitting someone down in front of a screen and having them take a 20-minute course, or having them watch a master do something and then try to replicate it. It is
Right.
much more than that. So maybe we could
Yeah.
talk about some of the things that make the world of learning and development so robust, and the types of things that are most effective in different situations, or the kinds of things that, at least, again, scratching the surface, what are some of the really major building blocks within L&D learning and
Absolutely.
development.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, we've talked about a couple of different models, not that you need to apply, these specific ones, but like
Yeah.
the one that comes to mind is, of course, Kirkpatrick, because we've talked about that before, but like that's training specifically, right? And there's this idea that the training needs to have a positive and people need to have a positive affect, right? A positive feeling towards the learning that they've undergone, and then there's the knowledge check that happens there, and then we reinforce this the behaviors through coaching and rewards and all those things, and then that provides the performance outcomes, right? Um, but yeah, but like you said, it goes beyond this, because we really need this to. There's the formal learning aspect, but then we've also talked about the acculturation of these changes, right? And that stems from also the informal learning aspects that come from doing and experiencing, and the water cooler,
Hmm.
conversations and all that type of stuff too.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I think you're touching on a lot of great things. There's sort of formal classroom style didactic learning, like most of us had in high school or college or a trade school type of thing. And then
Sure.
there was more of that experiential learning. There's allowing people to learn in different ways. Some of those same communication methods will also be used for learning
Sure.
methods, things like that. Um, allowing people to learn over a video, or now you can do a lot of learning that's sort of self-guided learning, interacting with some kind of tool that's built to be very interactive in that way. Knowledge checks to make sure you're understanding things at a micro level, but then also at the macro level, so you understand the details, but then also um, the whole point of why you're learning what you're learning, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
at different levels there, and then helping people with that development part of the learning and development in terms of where are you now and where do you want to be, or where do you think you might want to be? I mean, like when you're a kid, everyone says, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Well, yeah, okay, you might have some idea, but that changes all the time. And so,
Right.
with that
Right.
development, how do you grow your career? How do you grow your skill set, your knowledge base? What is the organization doing to facilitate some of that? How do you get to be um, a more well-rounded employee in that sort of sense?
Sure.
Those
Sure.
kinds of things are all really, really good things. And part of that learning, development, training, the discovery, giving people an opportunity to try different things in a safe way, or get exposure to new skills on a project where they may be able to flex a little bit or grow, or expand their skill set. Those are all really important things so that you can grow your talent pool within, but then also people, like you were saying, Rich, can become more self-fulfilled, self-activated, and self-motivated, which we've talked a ton about on prior episodes. But that
Sure.
um, internal self-fulfillment, self-motivation becomes
Yeah.
more important as you get more involved in things.
And there are mechanisms that you can put into play that can further that learning. Some of that is through mentorship. In fact, I was in a presentation yesterday by one of my fellow faculty members over at Trinity Christian College, and he mentioned three components to students that help with their learning. One of these is the the sage on the stage, right? Which is this is the teacher, right? That's putting that's transferring the knowledge to the group, right? Um, and the sage on the stage is kind of that's the I'm going to get this wrong, but it's really the what, right? That you're learning, right? And then there's the skills transfer that happens with the guide from the side, is what he said, right? So the guide from the side is this, where you're kind of um, enabling people to get in there and do things and try and fail and but guided, right? And then so that's more of the how of this. And then the why, which we always try to bring into things,
Right,
is
right.
the mentor in the center. I love that he said that, right? Because it's it's the mentor being present with and working with and learning with the the protege, so to speak, right? So there's that why, because you actually can take the learning that has that you're trying to establish, right, and put that into um, the why are we doing this, right? The context becomes a lot more clear when you can work alongside and show somebody this is why we're doing this, and hey, I'm leading by example, and or there's somebody who's leading.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's really cool. And it speaks to sort of that journey of learning in terms of when you're a neophyte, you're just, you don't even know where to start. And so you need someone to give you that initial exposure to what you're about to learn and
Right,
give you that framework or some sort of hook to start with. And
right.
that's that sort of sage on the stage, or it can be that stage on this sage on the stage approach.
Sage, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and then as you start to understand what it is that you're trying to do, you get in there and you practice it and you start doing some of that. So like the math teacher just told you a formula and then you start practicing the formula on some homework assignments and you have that guide on the side trying to help you figure out what you're doing right or what you're doing wrong, or a science experiment where, you got to fiddle with the Bunsen burner just right to get it. So and then you have the mentor in the center, which is sort of like now you're sort of saying, okay, I understand how to use these tools. Where else could I apply that formula? Could I
sure.
apply that calculus formula to a rocket ship and a curveball? It's the same kind of thing, or how does that work? Or can I fiddle with the Bunsen burner to make this kind of thing instead of that kind of thing in chemistry? And so it's really growing with you as a student and adapting to your learning styles and giving you some of that, like you were talking about, that hands-on experience, but in a very sort of graduated way that makes
Right.
sense. So you're not just completely floundering.
Yeah. And I like one of the things that you put in here from the Journal of Change Management is that we're not just building this knowledge, and we're not just developing the people just for the sake of doing it, or I don't know, but this to meet some requirement without meaning. We're actually looking for capabilities, right? So building actual capabilities within the organization, and it's that kind of capability that adds value to the human capital that the organization has, which is really ultimately what the organization is trying to do, right? Is to build value within itself to be able to produce more effectively, more efficiently, more innovatively. Yeah, to be able to differentiate itself from
Hmm.
competition.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. And so it's almost like the person is learning and growing and developing and becoming more self-fulfilled and self-actuated, and then hopefully wants to turn that back and mentor the next generation or
Right.
help the next generation grow. And at the same time, the organization is building up its capabilities and its organizational competencies.
Well, I think that might bring us then to the third segment here. So why don't we take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll talk about how do we keep the flywheel spinning, right? How do we keep that going? through rewards and reinforcement.
Love it.
All right. We'll be right back.
Oh, hi. I'm Hermie, the HR hermit crab. So, I have a quick question. Have you ever had that one employee who knows how everything works, but if you ask them to write it down, they say, "Ah, it's easy," and then don't write anything down? Yeah, me too. Try getting Hermione to share how she sets up her spreadsheets. Sheesh. Here's the thing, when knowledge stays in people's heads, performance gets wobbly. Training doesn't stick, new hires struggle, and suddenly everyone's asking, why did this used to work? That's why we talk about the knowledge to performance tree model as featured in TD Magazine from Harmonious Workplaces. Knowledge forms the roots of an organization's value. If you don't capture it before people retire, resign, or burn out, performance doesn't grow. You see, you can buy new systems, you can launch new initiatives, but without the roots, you mostly grow frustration. Anyway, I'm Hermie saying that Harmonious Workplaces is here to help you keep the good stuff from walking out the door. Make change your friend. Bye.
And we're back. All right, Ben. So we're talking about stakeholder engagement, part two. And for all those in the 90s, that should make you laugh. Yeah, so we're talking about beyond communication, which we talked about last time, really focusing in on what we talked about in the last segment, learning and development. Now, how do we keep that learning and development going and becoming enculturated and becoming part of
Right.
how the organization does things, right?
Right.
Through rewards
And
and reinforcement.
rewards and recognition, again, this is sort of the third leg of the stakeholder engagement stool, and so broad, kind of like the other two categories, learning and development and communication, very, very broad. So we're just going to be able to touch on it very loosely, but we have talked a lot about motivation in recent episodes. So there's, like you were saying before, Rich, a lot of good information on our website that you can look at that. But just in terms of this stakeholder engagement framework, we have that sort of rewards and recognition, and so that's where I think it's really helpful to think about that it's more than just the pizza party, and it's more than just the hopefully you get a bonus check at the end of the year, or something like that, or that kind of thing. It's more than just that, and how important it is to have some kind of approach organizationally to making your rewards and all of that more than just something like a showpiece kind of a thing like that.
Right. Sure. Have you found your organizations using MBOs to guide this? So MBOs, for those who don't, management by objective. Basically, you are establishing some threshold or some level of performance or whatever that begets getting some kind of a reward, right? For instance, like if we reach this adoption marker by X amount, which is going to save us a considerable amount of dough or other resources, right? Then we can take some portion of what that savings is and apply it to. It could be monetary rewards. It could be some other thing, right? But have you seen that type of thing being put in?
Yeah, I have seen that a lot of places do something like that, where they'll have organizational goals. If our organization reaches a certain level of sales or certain level of of earned income at the end of the year, everybody's going to get a portion of that as part of their end year bonus, or we'll take a certain portion of that and donate it to a charity that the organization supports, or something like that.
Sure.
Same thing on an individual level. If you personally hit these targets, and they don't have to be financial targets. If you're not in sales, it might not be as meaningful. But if you do X, Y, and Z by the end of the quarter, the month, the year, whatever it is you're tracking, then you're eligible for some kind of a bonus, whatever that means, or some
Mhm.
sort of benefit that you might be able to accrue. Um, that kind of thing. If you get a certain rating in terms of your service to a client, you're eligible for the Gold Star or the Month Award or what have you. And
Sure.
sometimes those things can become very coveted throughout the organization. That sort of reward statue that goes from person to person can become a very coveted thing. A
Mhm.
lot of organizations do that, and I think in the right way, that can become very motivational. Um, in the wrong way, it can become very demotivational, and so you just
Sure.
have to be careful about that. If you set goals that are unrealistic or goals that are um, too organizational and not personal. For example, if your organization has a sales threshold and you have almost no ability
No
to
control
influence
over it,
that,
right? Yeah.
it's meaningless, right? So you
Right.
have to be
Absolutely.
very careful about how you set those up. But if they're done thoughtfully, then they can be very personally motivating. And I've seen that where people are very motivated to say, okay, I've been tapped to be on a certain project. This project has to succeed. If it does, I'm going to get very heavily rewarded for it. And again, whatever that means to your organization, it can be a lot more than monetary.
Mhm.
And so that's where people then start to really buy into that and participate very, very fully.
Sure. Sure. And I found that even when like, at a change, let's just say it's like a customer service end of things, right? Where it's there there is a financial impact, but the customer service agent doesn't really get involved in that so much, right?
Right.
But by virtue of them, logging things in the system properly, or taking, better notes, or being able to reduce, uh, refunds, or other monetary exchanges, right? That type of stuff. Uh, that that can translate into either bonuses or something like that, or it could, or even some kind of recognition, because that esteem level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right, is very important. When we feel like we've reached this level of competency, that is recognized, that can go a long way, with even
Hmm.
without those monetary.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. Even if it's not a monetary reward, I think there's still a lot of value in giving people some recognition or reward for something. Like if you talk a customer down from a really angry conversation, that can be very meaningful and impactful. Or if you can help a customer through a really difficult challenge, that can be really impactful, and rewarding that person who helped the customer through that
Hmm.
challenge
Hmm.
can be incredibly valuable, and that makes that person, the employee, want to do that again, and feel like they've achieved something, and
Right. Right.
they can feel very personally rewarded by that. So
Right.
rewards is certainly much more than just financial. I think one of the things that we're sort of implicitly touching on is there's an element of feedback that's more than just the once a year annual review, that it's got to be meaningful feedback, very specific in the moment, that kind of a thing. And it can be just a simple, hey, good job, or it can be like, hey, everybody, put your pencils down for 4 minutes. We're going to recognize Rich because he just did a great job with this customer. And we ring the bell and all that kind of stuff. And then everybody goes back to work, but it's not like that was just once a year. That could happen on the
Right.
floor at any moment in time,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
So it's those kinds of things, and it also brings in that social reinforcement that we've talked about before, where you're part of that group and you get recognized by that group. Imagine if you do a really nice job making a part for whatever widget you're making, and all the people on the floor say, "Wow, Rich, that part looks just beautiful. You are a master at this." How good are you going to feel? Because all these
Oh
people
yeah.
are your colleagues, and are arguably very good also at making that part, and so
Sure.
they're going to really enjoy having seen you do that. But then you're going to also enjoy getting that really good feedback from them.
Right. I've actually seen, where there are some organizations, like, parts manufacturers that will actually manufacture a part as an award,
Oh,
right?
that's so cool.
That's
Yeah,
really cool, right? So it's like, yeah, this, your level of quality has been so high. Quality, of course, being uh reaching or exceeding some kind of standard, right, for
right.
that for the customer, right? So um so that, with so few defects or whatever, this either this group, this work group, or this individual gets, this manufactured piece that really signifies that they have achieved, this type of milestone, which I found not
I
only very effective, but really endearing.
I think that's so cool, Rich. I think we're gonna have to get you a golden Hermie.
Okay.
For
uh,
those who haven't had a chance yet, one of our favorite characters is Hermie the HR hermit crab, and he's just come out with his third book, Trust Fall Pratfalls, which Rich is showing on our screen if you're not watching. But Hermie
hmm
is a hermit crab that specializes in HR, in human resources, and goes through all sorts of crazy shenanigans in a pet shop that, strangely enough, mimic all sorts of crazy shenanigans that go on in real life and bring some lessons to the table for that. So
for
maybe
sure.
we have a Hermie the HR Hermit Crab annual award.
That would be lovely. I don't need it, but we should find somebody who does. Great.
The
I love
Golden
the idea
Herm,
of I love the idea of a golden herb.
or
What
maybe a plushy Hermie or something like
There you
that.
go. Yeah, yeah. But him holding
Yeah,
holding something aloft. Maybe he's holding one of his gerbil friends, aloft or something. I don't know.
desperate or just desperately clutching onto some remnant of self-respect or something like that.
Perfect. Oh, I love that.
One of the
Coming
things
coming
I
soon.
yeah, exactly. I know we don't have a ton of time, but just to touch on the flip side of rewards and recognition, y I think you'd be remiss if you didn't have some level of consequences built into
Sure.
your rewards and recognition system. So
Mhm.
just like communication includes good communication and delivering harder messages, and learning and development includes training and
And the
pats on the
corrective.
back, but also feedback that, maybe this part didn't come out so good, and what can you
Right.
do a little differently? Or maybe you're not meant to be this type of worker. Maybe you're meant to be a different type of worker, right? So,
hmm
that kind of thing. The same thing on the rewards side, there has to be some element of, we have basic expectations here. If you
hmm
can meet those, great. If you can exceed those, we will love you and reward you for it. But if you
Right.
don't meet the basic expectations, then we have to see if this is the right fit for you, the right organization for you. We have to understand what's going on. And so, again, there, you don't want it to be a once a year thing. It's not very helpful. It has to be
Right.
very much in the moment. And especially
Yeah.
if it's trying to give some people more difficult feedback, or more of that, delicately called coaching feedback, that you have to have it be very specific, non-emotional, but also very much in the moment, tied to a specific thing, so people can understand, oh, here's where I went off course. Instead of
hmm
doing it this way, I should have thought about doing it this way. Or instead of
Right.
using this tool, I should have used that tool. Or instead of applying this amount of pressure, I should have done that amount of pressure, right? So
Right.
having
Right.
people learn that in that moment and feel those consequences in that moment, much more helpful in the longer term at growing that person, at building that person's confidence and self-esteem back up, but
Sure.
also allowing them to grow into something, as opposed to just once a year getting that, like, "Hey, you didn't meet your metrics, you're out of here." Like,
Right.
what good does that do to anyone? Right.
Yeah. And just like the positive rewards, right? We also need to make sure that we are intentionally striving to be equitable in how we distribute that, right? So, doing so with fairness and level, setting up the expectations of what those outcomes would be
Yeah.
if we did this, if we did that, prior to this. And then also the valence of the severity or of either one, right? Of either positive or negative, right? Being intentional about that according to what that is on the project or in the organization as a whole, that type of stuff. So equity is one of those things that's often talked about in rewards because it's important that we're again, intentional on that because we have that again that need for the sense of belonging, right? I think that's the third step on Maslow, but then there's also that again there's that aspect of esteem, right? When we don't feel like there is some fairness and it can be somewhat demotivating or wholly.
Yeah, absolutely. And so much of the research that's been coming out recently about what motivates people, about what people find attractive or unattractive about a workplace, what they value in a workplace environment, money and financial rewards, financial compensation overall is always going to be very important, but it's being shown in a lot of different studies recently that it's not the most important by far. It's
Right.
important, but there are other things like, to your point, Rich, being recognized, being treated fairly, feeling like you have an opportunity to grow within the organization, that there's a
Right.
home for you there or a path for you there, and then feeling like you're respected by your managers, by your peers, and feeling like you're part of something. Those aspects are almost almost equally important as the total financial compensation.
Absolutely,
So
for sure.
it's not the kind of thing where you can just throw money at it anymore. I
Right.
think in many cases there's so much more to it that you have to factor that into to how you attract talent, how you retain talent, how you motivate people, and how you engage stakeholders in any kind of a change. That a lot of times change initiatives, you can't throw money at someone. You're adapting to a change in the supply chain, or you're rolling out a new
Right.
technology. You can't just necessarily throw money at someone and say, I'll pay you $20 more per hour per every time you use this system. That doesn't work. And so
Right.
you have to
Right.
think about how you use all of your tools to get that change
Mm-hmm.
embedded and get people to adopt and adapt that change.
Yep.
And then ultimately, all of this is about behavioral change. And so those communication, learning and development, all of the rewards and recognition, it's all about enabling behavior change.
Nice. That's right. Great. Well, Ben, we're about at time here.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, folks, for joining us on this. What do we say? 105th episode.
105th.
Woo! Awesome. Well, thank you for being so supportive of us. Thank you for liking and subscribing and being part of our community. Please let us know what your thoughts are on this subject. We'd love to hear
Engage
from
with
you.
us.
Yes, right on. Perfect. And well, Ben, why don't you take us out today?
Yeah. Until next time, make change your friend.
Thanks for listening to Harmonious Workplaces. You can find all episodes, resources, and ways to connect with us at www.harmoniousworkplaces.com. If you enjoyed the show, we'd love your feedback. Please rate, review, share, and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. And don't forget to add Harmonious Workplaces to your favorites so you're notified when new episodes are released. Again, visit us at www.harmoniousworkplaces.com.